All right. Hello, everybody. We will begin very shortly. All right. This is the Inventory Secrets webinar. We're going to talk about IPI. We're also going to talk about some of the things that have been going on with the restock limits recently. So people are finding their way onto the webinar. Let me know that you can hear me. I see people starting to join. So type in the chat. Let me know you can hear me. If you have questions along the way, do type them into the chat or into the Q&A section, and I will get to them. If they're relevant, I'll try to get to them during the presentation. And if they are not, we'll just save them to the end. All right. So we're going to talk about the IPI limits. We're going to talk about restocking. And at the end of all of this, I'm going to give you a resource. I'll actually send it via the email. So if you stick to the end, you'll get an email that includes the replay. It'll also include the list of community generated list of warehouses, fulfillment centers, and also will include within that list a recording of our webinar on the warehouses and fulfillment centers, because there are a lot of things to learn about that. If you're going to be starting to work with a warehouse or fulfillment center, it's a lot of things to know. So it'll include that as well for your reference. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I assume everyone can hear me. All right, so here we go. All right, so we are going to be discussing surviving IPI limitations during the holidays. Hopefully you guys are having a great holiday season. Hopefully your sales are going well, and I'm sure that more than one SKU has been restricted. We've recently had some additional restrictions. So we'll talk a little bit about that. People do hope that there's a magic pill. There doesn't seem to be a magic pill at this point, but there are some bugs that you should know about that could be affecting your levels and your inability to get as much inventory in as you think you should be able to get in. So we'll talk about that. All right, a little bit about me. For those of you who don't know me, I do recognize some people on the call. So some of you guys do know me. Some of you guys don't necessarily know me. I've been selling on Amazon since 2014. And then I got into, found my way onto the seller stage, talking about copywriting, and have a copywriting agency. Have been working with clients and students who've been able to significantly increase their conversion rates using copywriting. So I'm definitely a fan of copywriting. And then about 2018, I was tired of inventory management problems. And so I kind of got into the inventory management space to try to solve my own problem. So the things that I was dealing with, I was, over ordering sometimes based on bad data. I was running out of stock, so sending things too late, running out of stock. A bunch of inventory got stranded just before Christmas. It got lost by Amazon, and that loss, this was early on, probably second Christmas that I ever had, got lost. And so I basically lost out the majority of my Christmas sales because my inventory did not make it to Amazon on time to get checked in, and therefore they considered it lost until after Christmas when they miraculously found it. Type in the chat if any of this is familiar. Over ordering and then paying thousands in storage fees and interest, overestimating holiday orders based on, past sales spikes. So all of these things, as well as just the amount of time that it took me to put these reports together to figure out what I actually had to sell, and what should I be ordering based on those sales. It took such a long time that I tended to procrastinate, and then found that I should have ordered 2 weeks ago based on the procrastination, because it just took so much time and there were so many other things going on as a solo entrepreneur. So this is hopefully a little bit familiar, and hopefully can help you with at least some of these issues with the conversation we're going to be having today. All right, so I knew that I basically needed a solution, And I basically decided that I was going to find someone to build me a software because none of the softwares out there really worked. They didn't make sense to me. I asked all the people in my masterminds what they were using, and they basically said, there's nothing really that we have found. Let us know if you find something. So I found it as an opportunity to put something together. I knew how I wanted it to work. And so I just hoped that I would find someone and meet someone who could help me with that. So 2 weeks after making that decision that I wanted to find someone and to build something, I met Dan Fernandez. Dan Fernandez is the founder of Tomoson.com. I had personally used Tomoson back in 2015. It is a brand influencer connector website. And at that time, they were working with a lot of Amazon sellers to do video reviews. Of course, that was then banned. So his business pivoted off of Amazon, but still was very familiar with the space and familiar with the people. And so we ended up speaking at the same event. And he said he was really bored. He needed a new SaaS project, and I needed someone to build something for me. So we connected up, became business partners, and have been, Restock went live July of last year. And so we've been, going strong, really focusing on listening to what the sellers need. And so when the IPI and Restock issues came up earlier this year, we worked really hard to put together some solutions to get some data so that we could build some things that were really actionable. So I've really dove deep into restocking. What is restocking? What is the IPI, the Inventory Performance Index? What are the things that you need to know so that you can actually build a sound, solid business? And we even discovered some potential bugs that could be influencing your stock restock limits right now. So, all right. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me. We've tested out a lot of inventory management softwares. Really, Restock has been built a lot with the help of 6, 7, 8-figure sellers who've come into the software, given it a chance, decided to try it sight unseen, and then give us their feedback. So we've done a lot of crowdsourcing of the best information from some of the smartest people selling on Amazon. And that's really what has gotten us to where we are. It says here, I've spoken to dozens of sellers. I've spoken to hundreds of sellers now at this point, just based on the fact that anytime someone signs up for Restock, they schedule an appointment with me. I talk to them about their inventory management. So I've learned a lot about all of that. So hopefully you guys can benefit from some of what I have learned from my own research and a lot from these other sellers that I've worked with. All right, so in July, Amazon dropped a bomb. That bomb was the IPI, or the Inventory Performance Index threshold. It had previously, earlier this year, had been at 350. They bumped it up to 400, and then they bumped it up again to 500. What that meant was that you had to have a score of over 500, or you were going to get specific restrictions put upon you, right? Storage volume limits and that type of thing. They really want you to be good at maintaining healthy, well-balanced levels of inventory. And if you're not, they're essentially punishing you for it. So everybody freaked out. There were some people who were able to improve their score enough to get above that dividing line, and some people didn't. So that was a big hustle. And so what that meant is that these restrictions were going to be going in place till the end of the year. So till December 31st, we're almost there. We're almost to the end of the year. However, what we're finding is that one thing that's happening is that all sellers are seeing limits. That's the first thing, right? All sellers are seeing limits. So it isn't just the people under 500 that are seeing limits. They may be seeing more constricted limits than we have as normal sellers, but all sellers are seeing limits. And as the holiday season has gone on, we've actually seen additional limits put upon us that probably within the last 2 weeks has been really pretty crippling, pretty devastating, and there was no real warning. So we say that it's going to extend till the end of December, to December 31st, and people are crossing their fingers that everything's going to go back to normal. I don't think that it will go back to normal. I think it will loosen up. So what we're going to talk about is going to be some of the things that you should just really get better at, because I don't see this as ever getting back to the way it was pre-COVID. unfortunately. So getting really good at this, and the writing's kind of on the wall that you need to learn how to cope in this new environment, which will most likely include you getting a third-party warehouse if you are, especially if you are a private label seller, because you need to order in bulk and Amazon won't want you to send all of that inventory. So unless you can store your inventory in China in your Chinese warehouse for free, you might have to get a third-party warehouse either in China or in the country that you're selling in. All right, so we'll talk about that. Okay, so what is an IPI score? So for those of you who don't know, the IPI stands for Inventory Performance Index. So that's basically what Amazon says they use to calculate the maintaining of a good balance of inventory, right? There are 4 factors that they say are involved in having a good inventory performance index score. There are probably other hidden factors, and we know of at least one by survey that we'll talk about. But some of the things, you can read the documentation and you can read what Amazon says about restocking and about inventory performance index. But when it really comes down to it, it's good to be part of a community of smart Amazon sellers, because there are kind of things, little hidden things, read between the lines, find these things out. You'll learn that there are other things that may affect certain parts of your restocking that Amazon doesn't talk about, or they'll say that there's a specific formula, which we'll talk about. They'll say that there's a specific formula that works a specific way, but then when in actuality, you see that it works differently. So we'll talk about a little bit of that. Okay, so what is the difference between IPI limit and max ship quantity? So there's your IPI limit and then there's your max ship quantity. And these are 2 very important numbers to know and to have. And I can talk about how to find these. But your inventory performance index limit, or your restock limit, is the total amount of inventory that Amazon will allow you to have at FBA. So you'll have 2 different limits, essentially. You're going to have your per SKU limits, right? Your restock limits. And you're also going to have your global space limits. So that is your inventory performance index. Your restock limits will have to do with your per SKU limitations, right? And some accounts won't even get close to hitting their global space limits, but some will. So if you have overstocked items, you might have a hard time, fitting all of your per SKU limits into the small amount of space that they allow you to. So that's a bit of a challenge for people who have oversized products. The ship quantity is essentially, it's what you're allowed to send in. So if you have, say you have a limit of 2,000 and you currently have 1,000 units at Amazon, but you also have 500 units that's coming into Amazon in FBA shipments, you're only going to have 500 left in your max ship quantity. So your max ship quantity is your limit minus your current FBA inventory and then anything that is coming in by FBA shipments. So that's how you calculate those, and those 2 things should match. You should be able to do the math and see how the limit and the available inventory and the shipments equals your max ship quantity. So the way that you locate these numbers is you actually go to your Seller Central account. You would go to reports and then go to fulfillment and go to restock inventory. And you're going to be able to find a downloadable report that gives every single SKU the amount of inventory that you have basically allocated, right? Your inbound plus your available inventory. And then you'll be able to see your restock limits and your max ship quantity, right? In order to find your space limits, right? If that's something that you are concerned with, if you're confused as to why you're not hitting your max ship quantities, but you're still not able to send in because of certain, space requirements, you can go to the inventory dashboard, right? The inventory health, where you can see your IPI score, and scroll down to the very bottom and there's a storage section. It's hard to notice. It's actually a drop down. And so you scroll to the bottom, you click on that, and it's going to pop up, and it's going to give you the amount of the percentage of that you have used up, right? And how much you have available, right? It could say unlimited. For some accounts, it says unlimited. And for some accounts, it'll give you that space, the amount of space that you have reserved for you. So we're going to talk about influencing factors. So influencing factors to your IPI score. These influencing factors, for the most part, are also key performance indexes for just healthy inventory management, right? The better you are at inventory management, the lower your fees should be, the less you stock out. And that's really all that these factors are kind of pushing towards is you having a good, healthy balance in your inventory, which also helps Amazon to keep their space open and to keep that inventory moving. They don't want a lot of stagnant inventory, and they don't want to be out of stock on the items that are currently usually selling for them. So the factors are, these are the factors that Amazon says influence health: stranded inventory, excess inventory, sell-through, and in-stock inventory. So your path to improving your IPI, we would start with stranded inventory. So with stranded inventory, really that's essentially just that you've got inventory at Amazon, but it's not connected to a live listing. So it could be that your listing is currently suspended. It could be that you're a wholesaler and you started selling a product and the brand kind of slapped you and said, no, you're not allowed to sell this product anymore. For whatever reason, you are not allowed to sell on that listing. And so you have inventory, but you have no way for anyone to buy it. So there are a couple of things to do. This is probably the fastest and easiest way to handle this, generally, right? So the first and easiest thing to do would be to figure out why you have been delisted and to get that listing to be live again, right? Maybe it was that there's a word that you didn't understand that you were not allowed to use. And there's a lot of those nowadays, by the way. So maybe it's a word that you were not allowed to use. If you guys are interested also, if you reply to my email and you're interested in getting a restricted terms list, I've also created a restricted terms list and I'm adding to it all the time. This is just terms that you're not allowed to use per Amazon. They will suspend your account or they won't approve the enhanced brand content. And there's a lot of new ones that are coming up that are actually pretty frustrating. Non-toxic is one of them. Eco-friendly is another one of them. So so you would want to, if you wanted to receive that, you can send me an email to stock@sostock.com or just reply to the email that goes out with this replay. All right, so this is, so usually you want to find a way to make your listing live again, and that should handle the issue, right? If you can't do that, you might have to remove that inventory. So if that's something where you are a wholesaler and you're not allowed to sell that brand, simply have that inventory destroyed or removed and sent back to you. Okay, then there's excess inventory. So with excess inventory, you can create removal orders to remove overstock, or you can do, it used to be like every year. So every year you have a waiving of removal fees. Removal fees at this point are, I believe it's 30 cents per unit to remove. You can also destroy the inventory or, dispose of the inventory. I think it's 15 cents at this point. I could be wrong. Don't quote me. You can go look on Amazon's current fees list. But they're going to charge you to remove that. But middle of the year, about August or so, they usually start offering to waive those fees because they just want to get rid of that inventory to make way for, 50 cents. Okay, 50 cents and then 30 cents. Yes. Okay, good. Thank you. So essentially you want to remove those. It might be a good strategy to have to, once these removals, Amazon offers these, they've offered the waiving of these removal fees to get ready for the holidays for several years now. So it could be a good strategy for you to sort of plan on cleaning house every year. If you're not able to move that inventory, you would try things to move that inventory, but if you can't move that inventory, it might make sense to, during this removal fee period, remove that inventory at no cost to you. So every year it might be something where you set an alarm and you say, okay, let's look, realistically at removing some of this inventory. All right, the other thing would be to set up a 3PL or a fulfillment center, right? A third-party warehouse or a fulfillment center, because if you've been sending inventory, you order from the, minimum order quantity from your supplier, you send it all into Amazon. The better way to do it, and sort of the way that you have to do it now, is that you have a third-party fulfillment center or third-party warehouse, right? So having a third-party warehouse is another way to ensure that you're not sending excess inventory into Amazon, right? Amazon just doesn't want to be, a parking lot for your inventory. So, okay, good data is important. So talking about how to figure out how much inventory to send into Amazon, right? So they're going to give you their limits, right? But you should be able to figure out for yourself what is a good amount of inventory and not send too much, and also not, stock yourself out. So the things that you really kind of start thinking with are, if you're currently looking at your total number of sales to calculate how much you need to order, that can be kind of dangerous, because especially if you're looking at last year's sales, if you stocked out, if you ended up, having these huge sales spikes for lightning deals or promotions that you're not going to have again, taking that whole total amount of sales for that period can be very erroneous. It can cause you to overorder. For example, one year we had a mention on one of the morning news stations and sold a whole bunch within the next 2 days after that presentation. So it was a surprise to us, but the next year, if we don't remove that, if we just look at the full number and don't remember that there was this huge spike because we were on a national news station, we could end up purchasing a whole lot of inventory that we're not going to send, just based on the fact that we didn't properly document that information. We did not remove those outliers from the equation. So that would be something like this. If we were to jump into, I'm going to jump into our inventory management software. This is all stuff that you can do on a spreadsheet. I do know there's some, I noticed some of our software users, our SoStock users, are on the call today, but most everything you can do on a spreadsheet. It does get a little bit difficult to do the sales spikes and stockouts on a spreadsheet, but what will happen is you'll actually recognize these spikes. So the way that we calculate spikes is we look at your average sales for the period, and then we look at anything that's 150% of your average sales for the period, right? So we'll notice, we'll be able to catch sales spikes in that way. And then once the Christmas season comes about, those sales spikes are going to go away because the overall sales are increasing. And you can come in and you can decide what's a sales spike, what's not a sales spike, and you can choose to include certain data and exclude certain data. But it's just a way for you to be able to better isolate what, you're trying to build something so that you're trying to build a forecast so that it shows what is likely to happen in the future, right? So you want to remove the things that aren't likely to happen in the future. And stockouts, it's the same thing with stockouts, eliminating stockouts. And I'll talk a little bit about the formula for considering what you should consider a stock out and how you should do that calculation in a second. Okay, so the other thing that you might consider doing that has become very popular is using a min-max restocking system for orders and transfers. Min-max restocking is something that I learned about when I went on a tour of a printing warehouse, a printing and manufacturing facility. So they basically had to order these huge drums of ink and these huge spools of paper. And in ordering these, they had to figure out, they have to adopt these systems to make sure that they're constantly in stock. So they have a minimum and a maximum. And so what that is that you're setting a minimum, right? You never want to go below a certain amount, right? The minimum is also known as a buffer stock or a safety stock. And you should always have a minimum. It's kind of like when your gas light comes on and tells you you need to go get gas, and you know that you've got enough to get to the gas station before running out, right? If the light came on and you were literally out and your light came on and then you ended up on the side of the road 2 minutes later, it wouldn't be a very good warning. So a buffer stock or a safety stock is a warning, right? That helps you to ensure that whatever goes wrong, you'll still have a little bit left to get you through. Right. So we're going to go ahead and talk about how minimums and maximums should work. And I'm also going to tell you some of the things you need to think about in setting a good minimum or a good buffer stock, because I see some people setting it too low. And so I'm going to talk about a little bit about Amazon's algorithm and why you should set it with certain things in mind. Okay, so the minimum and the maximum, you can set it in units or you can set it in days. I prefer setting it in days, and you can set it for your FBA, and you can also set it for your warehouse if you're using a warehouse. So for example, so what it means is that the maximum is that how much you're going to ship in at all times, right? For example, if you wanted to have at the top, you said, I want to have no more than 90 days worth of inventory, then your maximum would be 90 days. And then you can set your minimum for 30 days. And so it's going to tell you what you need to send in so that by the time your inventory arrives, you hit your maximum of 90 days, right? And this is what those printing warehouses were doing. They say, we want 90 days worth of inventory, and then we're going to sell through, and we want to be alerted with enough time so that by the time the next order arrives, we hit our 30-day buffer stock. So if it takes 10 days for your inventory to get there, it's going to tell you 40 days before you run out, right? So it's going to say ship into 90 days, sell through to 40, then order, then the 10 days later, your inventory is going to arrive when you hit 30 and you're going to go back up to 90. So you're always within this range. One of the reasons this is really good, in addition to being efficient, right, and helping to minimize stockouts and minimize your storage fees. The other way that this becomes efficient is that you can then more easily pass this on to a VA or an assistant, because it's kind of more paint by numbers, right? Push this button, push that button, instead of this gut feel that a lot of us entrepreneurs like to do. Oh yeah, as needed, I have to think what I would do. And it's just, it's all kind of in our heads, and we can never pass this job on to anyone else. But if we set some parameters, it becomes a lot easier to pass that on to somebody else. And setting it in days rather than in units allows for it to fluctuate. So in your high season, 30 days might be very high in number of units, and in your low season, it might be much lower in number of units. So setting it in days, it will allow for fluctuating, right? It will also look at any sales that you have. So if you have a planned sale, it will add those additional 500 units that you plan to sell. So because it's looking at days across a timeline, it's not just taking 30 days and multiplying it by whatever your velocity is today. All right. Oh yes, and I was going to tell you about the buffer stocks. So when you're setting your buffer stock, sometimes I see people do 10 days of buffer stock, right? Because they want to keep their fees low. And they think, one of the things they're thinking about with buffer stock is, I just want a little bit of cushion just in case anything goes wrong, but I don't want to keep too much there because then, I'm being charged the fees and that type of thing. And maybe for some businesses that works, but the thing to keep in mind is that Amazon has 2-day Prime, right? They have their Prime shipping, their 2-day Prime shipping. They also, for some products, especially in the grocery space, have 1-day shipping, right? Which you might have noticed. And then they have these 1-day shipping badges that they give. And so some of our users have noticed that when they have too little inventory, they lose their 1-day shipping badge and they're no longer eligible for 1-day shipping. The other aspect is that you want enough inventory spread out throughout the country to be able for Amazon to easily hit that 2-day shipping target, right? So if your competitor has a bunch of inventory in the Midwest and you don't really have much of any inventory in the Midwest, you're both competing for the same ads, it's very likely that Amazon's going to award those ads. If you're bidding the same and everything's very similar, it's going to award those ads to your competitor, or it may even, with geo ranking, it may even rank your competitor higher in that specific area because it knows for the time being that the inventory is not available, is not available for 2-day shipping for you. So they don't want to give a bad customer experience. So having a very slim buffer means that you don't have a good saturation of your product throughout the entire country, right? Or continent, whether you're talking about the US or, the EU. So you want to make sure you have enough saturation. So your buffer stock, maybe consider testing it out at 30 days, maybe 20 days, but this 10, 15 days can be a bit dicey, especially now with the longer check-in times. So hopefully that's helpful to kind of give you an idea of buffer stock and why you might want to skew your buffer stock a little bit higher than maybe you would have thought. All right, let's go back. Okay, sell-through rate. So sell-through rate is when your inventory comes in, how long does it take to sell through and to sell it out, right? For example, you might send inventory in and it could take a month to sell through, or you could send inventory in and it takes 6 months to sell through, right? Selling through that batch of inventory in a month is a better sell-through rate than selling it in 6 months. For a couple of reasons. One, Amazon really wants to see your inventory moving. So it really pays attention to sell through, and it wants to see that your products are selling through and that you're not just keeping excess inventory, right? It can start to ding your excess inventory, and it can start to ding your sell-through score. But the other thing is, the longer your inventory stays there, the less profit you're making. Because if you consider, if you're getting billed for, monthly storage, then every month that's just another bite out of your profit, another bite out of your profit. And so, having a quick sell-through rate and turning over that capital faster means you're using those dollars much faster. So you want to, potentially, you have that balance of making sure that you've got, you don't have excess inventory and that you have a fast sell-through, but at the same time not stocking out. So some of the things you can do to increase your sell-through rate are to basically see if you can do, improvements to your conversion rate or improvements to your traffic, right? Those are just the typical marketing things, right? Rewriting your copy to increase conversions or add more keywords, putting a PPC campaign together, doing some Facebook ads, dropping your price and doing a temporary sale. All of those types of things increase your traffic and conversion and will help to increase that sell-through rate. So essentially, you should have a goal to look over your slow-moving products on, say, a regular basis, maybe every 2-3 months, and see what are those items that really just aren't selling like you thought they would, and what are some creative things that you can do to increase the sell-through rate on those slower moving products. Okay, so part of another benefit to increasing your sell-through rate, if you're selling faster, it's going to increase your limits, right? Your restock limits. So a lot of people were saying that in November, their limits were quite high, and then after, mid-November, their limits started to drop again right before the Christmas holiday. Well, the thing that we had Prime Day, and Prime Day, helped us to get a boost in our restock limits. So if you did not maintain a good level of sales, that could have negatively affected you when that kind of rolled off. So increasing your sales, even if it might mean a little bit less profit because you're dropping your sales, because you're dropping your price, or maybe you're spending more on ads, it could help you to increase the restock limits. So if increasing the restock limits means that you're going to stay in stock, it might make sense to make less profit if you're going to consistently stay in stock and you're not going to, you know, end up risking a stock out and risking destroying your restock limits. And then just, you know, stop sending in too much inventory. Again, we talked about min-max restocking and the having a warehouse, an additional warehouse. Those things are just important things to start setting up. It's a shift in, you know, what a lot of us have been used to doing. So we've probably seen more people getting into warehousing this year than pretty much ever before, but that will help you to start batch sending in your inventory so that you don't send everything in at once and then just, you know, hope that it sells. All right, so we've talked about velocity, we've talked about sales spikes, warehousing, we've talked a little bit about, and then min-max transfers, right? So one thing that I did want to show you is that you can create a report actually in terms of locating some of your slower moving products, right? In terms of sell-through, you can actually create some reports inside of the inventory dashboard, right? And again, this is something that you could build a fancy spreadsheet for. We've got it here and available. If you were to go into your inventory and look at your filtering, what you would want to see is you want to see your days left on Amazon. So you can create a report for days left on Amazon and say, for example, anything over 90 days you want to see. So it's going to pull up everything left that's over 90 days. So you can see the products that are way overstocked. You can see this is our test account. So it's got some really crazy numbers in here, but it's going to pull up everything that's over 90 days. So it really gives you, say on a monthly basis or every 2-3 months, you pull up this report, and this is something that you can save, right? You can add it as a new dashboard. You can say, you know, over 90 days, you can save it. And so you can just pull up this report. You don't have to save it as a favorite. You could save it over here in the drop down. But this will give you a report that will then say be a task. You could even have a VA whose job it is to figure out how to move through or liquidate these slower moving products, right? You could also build a liquidation report where you look at your adjusted velocity, and then anything under 5 units a day goes on that list. And so you have anything that's got inventory but has over 5 units a day. So these are some reports that you can create to be more proactive in controlling your inventory. It also becomes more proactive in moving your capital, right? If you've got a bunch of inventory just sitting there, it's collecting a lot of fees over time, and it's tying up your capital. So it might make sense to just, you know, get rid of it and find another product that is doing better, that's going to do better for you. Okay, in-stock inventory. So in-stock inventory, that is how, it's basically, it's a rate they're calculating how much of the time are you actually in stock versus how much of the time did you stock out. So they're going to look at your SKUs, and each SKU is going to get its own score. So for example, this is the example that they give on Amazon. They say that this particular SKU was out of stock for 50% of the time. The other SKU was out of stock for, you know, was in stock the whole time. Then they're going to look at what percentage of your entire stock that was. If you're selling, you know, if the velocity is 2 units a day versus 3 units a day, obviously the one with 3 units a day is going to be more heavily weighted. And so they are going to calculate, and essentially they take these 2 SKUs and they calculate that your total in-stock rate is 80%. So some people were asking, you know, does it make sense for me to delete a SKU if I'm not, you know, if I have a SKU and I feel like it's, you know, hurting my IPI score, should I delete it? In the case of, say, the top one, yeah, that would help. You know, if you deleted this one that was 50%, then your in-stock rate would go up from 80% to 100%. But if you've got a SKU, maybe it is a good seller, but it's had some, you know, bad trouble stocking out, then if you were to delete SKU number 2, then your in-stock rate would go from 80 down to 50. So it's just something to consider when you are thinking of deleting some of these SKUs. They may or may not help you with your score. So it may be that you've got a product that it really hasn't been doing much, but it's been in stock the whole time, right? Maybe it sells, one every couple of days, but it's been in stock. Well, that's actually helping your in-stock rate. It's not necessarily helping your excess inventory or your sell-through rate, but it's helping, it's helping with this particular statistic. One thing to note about this though, One thing to note about this though, this is what they're saying is the calculation, the in-stock rate calculation. So based on this calculation, we would think that they're tracking stockouts. We would think that they're tracking stockouts, and if they're tracking stockouts, then they should be able to tell that out of 30 days, I was out of stock for 10 days. So they should be able to get a daily velocity, right? Daily velocity of accurately would be looking at the 20 days that you were in stock and figuring out what your daily sales were for only those 20 days, not for the 30 days, because that would include a bunch of days full of zero sales. So the issue with that is that Amazon actually, when they're calculating your restock rate, they're actually not, they don't care if you stocked out. They should care, and they should be able to say, okay, well, he said he sold 200 units in the last 30 days, but he was out of stock for 10 of those days. So he really is selling 10 units a day. So we should give him 300 per month. Well, they're actually giving you 200 per month because they don't care about stockouts. Their algorithm is not very smart. It looks like it's smart here, but when you actually look at the data, when you stock out, your score goes down, your limits go down. So I'm going to tell you how to combat that. There are actually some ways to, even if you do stock out, to keep your stock out or your restock limits in a good range and not lose that. Because what happens is it creates this cycle, right? You have a stock out, you send inventory in. You can't send inventory in because Amazon is saying that you have a limit. Then during that time, you send your inventory in, you stock out while your inventory is waiting to be checked in. Then your limit goes down. It just creates this vicious cycle. So there are some ways that you can actually get around that, right? So, so we'll talk a little bit about quantity limits, right? And I also want to just jump into our stockouts. When you're calculating your stockout, it's actually something really important to jump into as part of this conversation. When you are working on your stockouts and figuring out what your stockouts are, so whether you use SoStocked, I'm just going to talk about how SoStocked calculates these stockouts. If you're using another system or you're using your own calculations, this is something to keep in mind and to see how you're actually calculating your stockouts. So you're going to notice I have 10 units here, right? And I have 6 units here. And you would think that those aren't stockouts. But what we're looking at is we're looking at was there inventory, right? Did you have inventory at all? And that's going to be considered a stock out. If you had no inventory, that's considered a stock out. But what if you sold a lot less than you normally do? So we're looking at any product that has 10 units or more in daily velocity, is selling 10 units a day, or more. We're going to look at percentages. We're going to look at anything that sells 30% or less of the average daily sales is also a stock out. Because what can happen is that you've got Amazon, said you've stocked out, and then Amazon finds 1 unit and then sells that unit. And that throws off your stock out calculation. And all of a sudden that's counted as an in-stock day, right? So some of these systems are counting that 1 unit as a full in-stock day, even though you sell 100 units a day. So that becomes a big problem, right? What about if they're just looking at inventory? If they're just looking at inventory and you have a bunch of inventory, but your listing was suspended for two weeks, that should be considered a 2-week stock out, even though you had a ton of inventory at Amazon. So we need to look at sales patterns, not just, in stock, whether you were in stock or not. So that's just a little bit about that. That becomes very important. And I think not enough people are looking into how, based on, depending on what system they're using, how is the stock out calculated, and they just kind of accept that there's some sort of mysterious calculation going on and trust it. And you know, you have to be very intelligent about these things, and Amazon themselves is not. So, okay, so what can we expect in terms of quantity limits? So we've seen a lot. We probably know by now, the majority of us, what to expect up until I would say a couple of weeks ago, right? A week and a half ago, there was a big shift. So the limits, the minimum limit has been 200 units. So if you're just launching a product and you have no sales history, or you sell a unit every 2 days or something like this, you're still going to have 200. That's the smallest amount that we have seen. Even if you are selling, you know, a unit a day, that's 200 days worth of inventory, but that's still the smallest number of units that you can have. And then they had been doing, giving you 90 days worth of inventory, right, based on your last 30 days worth of sales, as well as taking, you know, some people saw historical data come in. So if you were in the toys category, you might have seen that your limits jumped up significantly because Amazon was preparing for a bunch of people who had, you know, mediocre or, you know, standard sales, and then just completely spiked during the holidays. They were taking some of that past sales data. So that tended to be helpful to some people. Didn't happen in all, you know, on all SKUs. It didn't happen on all categories. So that's kind of in the past. But recently what we have seen is we've seen those 90 days worth of inventory has gone down to about 5 weeks. Is what we're starting to see. A lot of people saw a dip to 5 weeks of inventory. So you really have to be very smart. You're probably going to have to ship in a lot more often, because 5 weeks of inventory is not a lot of inventory, especially when Amazon can take 2 to 3 weeks to check your inventory in. So it becomes very kind of dangerous territory. There's not anything that I have found to address that. It's very new. If we do find something, we can, you know, definitely share it to you and let you know. I actually do these weekly calls on the So Stocked Facebook page. I try to do on Tuesday. Sometimes I don't end up getting to them until Wednesday, but you're welcome to come on there. That would probably be one of the first places that we would talk about some of this stuff. That's the first place that I talked about the bug that I'm about to talk about, that we did discover that we do think there may be a solution for. So anyway, we have seen that 5-week change, and we're hoping it's only till the end of the year, but it doesn't make things any easier. And however, if you do stock out, there are some things that you can do about it. So I'm going to talk about, you know, essentially, so you say you stock out, like what are you supposed to do when you actually, you know, stock out? So if you actually stock out, you should switch to FBM. You should switch to FBM because when Amazon's looking at your out of stock days, they're not, fortunately, they're not looking at your inventory in Amazon. They're looking at your sales. So they're counting sales. It doesn't matter if they're FBA sales, if they're FBM sales. So if you can switch to FBM and continue to make sales and continue to fulfill those, then your restock limits won't drop as significantly because you're still making those sales. So that's one thing to understand about the Amazon algorithm, is that if you're doing FBM, you're going to help to maintain that restock limit. Because if you can imagine that you've got 5 weeks of inventory and then you stock out for a week and a half, then you really have 3.5 weeks of velocity to deal with, right? And it still takes, you know, 2 weeks for them to check in. You're really starting to kind of corner yourself, right? So if you really want to keep in stock and survive through the end of the holiday season, which we're almost there, you know, we're almost there, but if you really want to, it's doing whatever you can to figure out how you can fulfill through FBM. So if you don't have that in place now, I'm sending out a list of companies that you can contact. It's getting really down to the wire. So hopefully you have those things in place. I would say to get those things in place, or at least have them as a backup plan moving into the new year, because we really don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully it will let up, but that I'm just kind of explaining to you some of the things that you can do to kind of work around what's going on. Okay, so the other thing to remember is this becomes important. I've seen more than a few people make this mistake. So shipments count towards your FBA stock. So if you create an FBA shipment and you have local inventory and then you have China inventory, and you label all your China inventory and you're sending it directly to Amazon, and then it's going to take 30 days to get there, it could create a problem where it blocks your local inventory from going in. So you need to make sure that you're always prioritizing your local inventory and putting your local inventory in first, and not, essentially blocking or taking up the space of local inventory by labeling China inventory and sending it in if you're going to run out of stock, right? If that does happen, see if you can find a way to divert to your warehouse and then just swap out the shipping labels, and and print out those shipping labels again from your FBA shipment, send in your local inventory, and then relabel the stuff from China when it does come in. All right. Okay, now we're going to talk about the bugs. This is the thing that we had mentioned, I think, when we were letting people know about this recent call coming up. This is something that we discovered probably about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And more people started noticing it, checking into it. But it was something that I noticed with a user I was onboarding. And so it's the NARF error. It's Amazon has conflicting algorithms, right? They have conflicting code. So if you're part of the NARF program, which is the North America Remote Fulfillment Program, what that is that you are, Amazon is taking all of your US inventory, you're sending everything into the US, but then they're allowing you to ship US inventory to the US, or to Canada and Mexico. So you basically are selling in 3 different territories, but housing in one location. So the thing that's happening with the NARF program is that it's doubling inventory. This is something that we noticed very early on. One of the reasons we haven't put FBM into our system, Amazon has a way of doubling inventory and double counting things. So they were doing it with FBM. And then they were also, if you had an FBM and an FBA listings, they would double that inventory and count it as double. And then they're doing it with the countries as well. So when we were pulling data into So Stocked, we would get, if you had 60 units in the US and 60 units in Canada, it would show 120 units. So that's happening on the Amazon side too. And it's double counting your inventory. So let me show you what that means. Okay, so this is a snapshot of one of the accounts that had this problem, right? So you see that the FBA inventory is 224 units, right? 3 of them are reserved. We always take the reserve number and we remove the customer order, so you know what you have in FC transfer and FC processing. So you have a full and accurate count. So it's 224 units, right? And these numbers are slightly off because some of our reports, Amazon lets us pull in only once, and some they let us pull in multiple times a day. So they're slightly off. I think there were about 11 sales that occurred between this report and this report. But you've got 224 units and you have a limit of 400. So you have close to 200 units that you should be able to send in. And yet it was saying that this product, this SKU is over the limit. This SKU is 254 units, right? And Amazon is every single day they're reassessing what your limit is, right? So that's the other delay that's going on, is that they're reassessing the limit based on every single day. That's something good to know, is every single day your limit is reassessed either up or down based on your sales. So it's double counting. So Amazon thinks that there are double the amount. They say you're overstock when you're actually understock. So this is something, if you're using the NARF program, I highly recommend you look into this and see if this is happening. It wasn't happening on all SKUs. It was happening on some of the faster sellers though. So that's important to pay attention to. And we have not seen how to remove this, but we do think that if you deactivate the NARF program, that could be the solution. So even if it's just till the end of the year, if you don't get a lot of sales from Canada, but you are running the risk of stocking out because of this, it would make more sense to turn off NARF temporarily and then and then go into, you know, hopefully correcting this and getting your true restock limits so that you can send things in and stay in stock. So that's something very, very important to take a look at in your own account. If the numbers really aren't making sense, especially if you've just been knocked down to five weeks, and then it's also double counting your inventory, you could be having a real hard time. And part of it could be this, for this, this reason. All right. Does closing but not deleting a SKU offer help improving the IPI? Closing but not deleting a SKU. I haven't seen whether that has improved things or not. I think most of what I was hearing was that it wasn't really helping. It wasn't really improving too much, but it could be very incremental. Some of these changes are very incremental, so it just depends on, you know, how much you're trying to improve, and you want to make sure that you're improving the right, you know, the right areas of your score. So, you know, go and look at which areas of your score are in trouble or need improvement, and then, you know, help to make those changes based on that. And closing, you know, closing, you can always open it again. So there should be no harm in closing it, seeing what happens, you know, after a few days, seeing if anything changes. And you can always undo it. Deleting is a little bit harder than that. You know, you have to relist it, you have to add it and all that. So it probably doesn't hurt to close the listing and see what happens. Right. I just personally haven't tested it, but I think the people that were testing it didn't see much of a difference. All right, and then for goodness sakes, just stay, you know, stop stocking out. Amazon's really sucker punched us on this. You know, they tell us not to stock out, and then they put, you know, all sorts of obstacles in the way of, you know, us stocking out. It's kind of like, you know, stop hitting yourself. You know, it's like, it's been kind of crazy. So, you know, they tell you not to stock out, and then they, you know, make it very difficult not to. But some of these things, you know, where you can use FBM, it helps you to, you know, ensure that you don't, you don't get into that restock, that stocking out cycle as easily, is to have that fulfillment center, right? So we've talked about all this. The marketing sync, there's something that we don't tend to do also. Looking at, say, the next 3 months before you place your order, look at the 3 months or the 6 months or however long your order is, you know, 2 months, 3 months, and figure out what marketing events are going to occur, right? Don't just decide on a whim to do a Mother's Day sale if it's going to mean that you're stocking out before your next order arrives, right? Put those plans into your calculation. So whether you're using SoStock or you're using another system, that's something that is very, very sorely missed, is not adding your lightning deals, right? Adding lightning deals, you know, how many units do you think you're going to sell on your lightning deal? You know, are you going to have seasonal sales spikes? Just adding these things in, and the inventory timeline here is extremely helpful. You know, having a visual of what's going to happen every day with your inventory. You can see when you're going to stock out. You can see if you know, can afford to, you know, increase your sales by 20% with a very aggressive PPC campaign, right? You can see, you know, if you get something like this, look, you're going to run out for a day. So here's a day where you're going to have less than normal sales. So you can see that there's, you know, maybe tweaks to be made. Maybe 20% growth isn't good, but you can do 15% and you can increase your order the next time, right? So you can come in here and add an additional, you know, when you come back in stock in your next order in January, you want to make sure that you are planning for an aggressive increase. Say you're going to increase another 10%, right? So building these plans in, planning for success. I have a really good friend of mine who said that he really had to come to the reality that he wasn't doing planning. He said, for the past year and a half, I've placed the same order every single month. I never planned to do any better than what I was doing. Otherwise, my orders would be bigger, right? So, you know, not being aggressive enough. You have to plan to scale or plan to grow or plan to take more of that market share. you have to have the inventory. Otherwise, when you do decide to make these changes, you don't have the inventory in place, and then you get into a stock out and it actually hurts you more than helps you. You know, a good marketing plan becomes a very bad one when it stocks you out and when you don't have any more inventory, right? So, all right, and then just, you know, to wrap up, Amazon does not want to be a storage facility, right? They may be your only sales channel, but they should not be your only distribution channel, right? So even if they're the only way you're making sales, they should not be, you should not be relying on them. As unreliable as we have found that they are, we can't give them all of our inventory. That was my big mistake, you know, my second year in selling. I gave them all of my inventory for Christmas and they lost all of it, right? So it's never a good idea to put all your eggs in one basket. And especially if Amazon's the basket in 2020, it's a horrible idea, right? So make sure that you have another way of getting your products to your customers. Make sure that you have have your inventory being held not just by Amazon, but also in your own third-party warehouse. It just gives you more control and more stability, more ability to pivot, whereas just sending all your inventory to Amazon, crossing your fingers and hoping that it gets checked in, that is something that we're seeing more and more is not a safe bet at this point, right? Maybe a couple of years ago, but even then, you know, it's good to have yourself safeguarded. So create a backup distribution center channel, have a fulfillment center, or at least know of one, right? And again, I'm going to send you guys a link to the fulfillment centers and warehouses that have been vetted and used by the community. And also a link to the webinar. It will be inside of that same document, a link to the webinar that we did that talks about how to pick a good one. Because there are a lot of these companies that are actually shutting down, because if you've got a bunch of businesses that you're holding their inventory and these businesses go out of business, they're not going to be paying you and they're not going to be removing their inventory. They create these huge problems for these warehouses, and the warehouses have been going out of business. So like the warehouse that we were just getting out of, we're about to sell out all of the rest of our inventory because we moved over to a new warehouse. So we're waiting to sell that out, and we just got the call that that warehouse went out of business. Now we have to find a new warehouse for that, you know, little bit of inventory that's left over in that warehouse. So these things are happening. So you want to make sure that you watch that. If you're really looking into, you know, finding a good warehouse, finding a good fulfillment center, you don't want to be their last ditch effort to make their business work, right? And send all of your inventory to this warehouse right before it goes under and then have to pay to remove it. So that's something to kind of, you know, to really understand what are the things that you should be asking them to make sure that they're stable. What are the things that you need to ask them before they have all of your inventory, to realize that the fees are so high and the way that they compute the fees are so unfair that it's going to eat into your profit margin. That's another reason why we left the warehouse that we left, is doing the math, doing the calculations, the amount of money that we were spending based on the unfair practices of those fees. Those are these things that we have discovered. And so we did a webinar with a friend of mine who does run a warehouse, and talked about what are those hidden fees and how can you avoid them, and what questions should you ask. So hopefully that will be helpful. It'll be in the email that I send out. So to wrap up, an Amazon inventory solution should have remove sales spikes, remove stockouts, factor in lightning deals, project seasonality, track orders and transfers, give you reorder alerts, and then you should be able to manage your FBA inventory, your warehouse inventory, and anything that is currently on order, right? We didn't talk about the order tracker, but there's a full order tracker, and you can track your warehouse inventory. Make sure that you have everything, you know where everything is all at once. So that's what I built SoStock for, right? Forecasting, the order tracker. We have PO creation that you can do, and then inventory management in general. So we've got some of our people who have been with us for a while, saving time. Excel sheets taking a ridiculous amount of time. They're open to human error. So Colette has been able to use SoStock to save time and to avoid that same human error to her inventory management system. This is another seller. This seller actually told me that due to using Restock, he's minimized the stock outs. He's been able to avoid expensive air shipments, and also his IPI score was in the high 700s because of having used Restock for over a year. So that was really cool. We also had someone who had commented that they had done a lot of air shipments, and with Restock, they stopped having to do air shipments. So their cost of per unit went from 120 to 45 cents. So that's big stuff, you know. So if you are someone who tends to have to rush things and does a lot of air shipments, you should get a system in place. And so that's what Restock was built for. If it's not Restock, then you should at least have some sort of system. But we have a ton of blogs that talk about what are the things that need to go into an inventory management system. What are these things to help you to create something where it's no longer this gut feel of like, oh, just when I notice that we're getting too low, I place an order, you know. This is someone who was using Restock to build his business to increase the valuation before selling it. He said that it's he couldn't say enough good things about it. It's a must-have. So something that he created to systemize his business before selling. So Restock right now, if you go to restock.com, you can get it for $59 a month. So if you are looking to go into the new year with a new system for your inventory, you can get Restock for life. I do on the onboarding calls, so you will be able to talk to me, ask me questions, get suggestions. And the last thing I want to add, so that's $59 a month for life. Your price will never go up. Doesn't matter how many orders, doesn't matter how many SKUs, doesn't matter how many features, the price is never going to go up for you. If you get into Restock, if you've been on the fence about it, we are raising the price at the end of the year, which is just a couple of weeks from now, right? So we just announced that. We just sent out our first email today about raising the prices. So we will raise the price, and that stage, it won't be unlimited features. So there'll be some premium features that won't be like some future premium features that we'll be releasing that people have been really asking for that will not be included in that. So the $59 a month for life locks in all of the features and ensures that you get the best of the best of Restock. So anyway, that's it. Just go to restock.com if you are interested. If you have questions, you can email stock@restock.com. And then that's basically it. Keep doing well and stay in stock for the rest of the of 2020, and just be awesome. And if you are interested in continuing with our webinars, we're going to start we've been doing a lot with IPI, just based on it's the thing that everyone is really struggling with. But we're going to be starting to do a little bit of a more refined new series for 2021, building a 2021 inventory planning system. So go to sostock.com/inventory-secrets for that. And again, reach out to me if you have any questions. I will be getting this video uploaded, and we'll be also sending out the warehousing list. And if you want the restricted terms list for copywriting, send me an email to reply to this email, and I can get that to you as well. All right. If you have any questions, let me know. I don't see any questions. Kind of like drinking from a fire hose a little bit. Maybe some of this stuff was stuff that you knew. Maybe some of it was not. If you do use the NARF program, I highly, highly recommend taking a look at your restock limits versus what you actually have in stock, and seeing if that's being double counted, because that could be, one of the answers to your problems. And then, and finally, if you do find anything out about anything regarding inventory management, feel free to let me know so we can share it with the community. All right, awesome. Thank you. Got some thank yous in there. Okay, cool. And yeah, have a great rest of your holiday season. I hope you have a great time with your family, or however you intend to spend it. And we'll see you on the next one. All right, bye guys.